The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Hi, my name is Joseph Bemister. Welcome to the Young American Podcast. I am your co-host. This is my co-host,
Riley Murphy.
Sorry, I am your host. Today we're going to be talking about Dr. Jo Jorgensen. She's from Libertyville, Illinois. We find that ironic because...
Quite ironic.
Quite ironic. Liberty. She's all about liberty. She's talked about abolishing the ATF, taking away income tax and housing taxes as well. We're going to tell you a little about her credentials.
So she is a senior lecturer at Clemson University.
She has a PhD in industrial psychology and organizational psychology. Sorry.
She graduated from Baylor in 1979 with a BS in psychology.
She also graduated from SMU with an MBA in psychology.
She also used to be a marketing representative at IBM.
And she was the Libertarian Vice President Nominee with Harry Brown in 1996. Harry Brown and her actually doubled the size of the Libertarian Party during their campaigning, and that was in 38 states.
They're up to 40 million?
Yeah, back then I think the party was sub-million, and then I forget the exact number, I'd have to look it back up, but it was almost 600,000 people, a little under that, and then she doubled it to a little over 1 million. I think it was 1.5 million.
Definitely did some damage there.
Did some damage there. She is known to be the mother of the Libertarian Party, per se.
I think she definitely woke up a lot of people from that.
Well, she's
in a way.
Yeah, definitely disrupted the two-party system.
Or at least made people understand what they actually want.
Exactly. She's told them that they don't have to choose between two things that they've been told their whole life. You don't have to choose between Republican and Democrat. There's a third option.
And that's where she gets into the I generation of people, our age group and younger, want to get into. They're more likely to do things that they want to do, not because someone tells them to do it. They're more likely to not go that route.
Yeah, her running mate, his name is Jeremy Cohen, aka Jeremy Cohen Spike. His credentials I couldn't really find too much on it besides that he started a technical or web marketing company in 1996, and he retired 3 years ago to focus on his political journey in the Libertarian Party. He's kind of a big advocate for voluntary society, so voluntary taxation, voluntary, like a consent per se anxiety, society, where it's do you want to pay taxes for X, Y, and Z? He gives people a choice. You pay into what you agree with. If you don't agree with Social Security, that you don't have to pay into it. That's a big thing she talked about is on day one in office if she gets it. And she did say that's a big if, and that's just because
a lot of people are struggling back and forth on that because,
Yeah, she's not going to abolish Social Security or take it away, but she wants to make it so the younger generation doesn't want to pay into Social Security. They want to pay into their own retirements, and they don't see Social Security is necessary, but older generations do. So she's going to give them a choice on that.
They see it as a strong necessity when younger generation sees it as basically a scam to them.
Exactly. And she does actually refer to it as a Ponzi scheme. In reality, by definition, it's a Ponzi scheme.
I mean, getting into the technicals for sure.
Yeah. The whole government's a Ponzi scheme.
I think there's too much of playing it safe.
There really is.
It's too much of a safety net now.
Yeah. And on top of that, a lot of people... the country's so divided and so different in different parts of the country. New England is not the same as the West Coast, and what's good for New England is not what's good for the West Coast.
Exactly.
I've always said that, and she's kind of advocating for a society where if California wants to do what California can do, they can make their own laws and do their own structure and have their own voluntary society, much like New England can. But obviously, you're going to see where the cultural difference is between the United States, because some people are going to have different morals and different rules and look at things in different ways. So you're going to see a big change, I think, if she was to get into office, and she definitely is going to disrupt the election this year. She already has.
I don't know how far she'll go, but she's definitely going to make a substantial impact.
She's around 10%. She's polling with the general public, which is big. That is big.
Her
education, or her views on the education system too, I really agree with. She wants to get rid of solely publicly funded education system and wants to go to a charter system.
She basically wants to kick the government out of the educational system.
Exactly, where you have your own choice to do what you want with your child, and she thinks that will strongly help the education system and improve education for all Americans, and with her experience, a lot of people who don't have the experience, like Pelosi and Schumer and even Trump, saying that what she said is wrong, the government needs to be involved in education. They've never been involved in education. So, I mean, listening to her, I'm going to take her side over, Trump's or Pelosi's or Schumer's.
I can definitely agree with the educational side of this and her, her output on it, because, I mean, I'm not too big of a fan of the current educational system right now.
No, not at all. You and I went through it.
It's not. I don't see it making a difference right now.
Yeah, like when I was younger,
no one's going. It's making it harder for people to go where they want to go.
Exactly, and a lot of students are struggling with like IEPs and who having different disabilities, like language-based learning disabilities. I grew up with an IEP, and I had to go to a not a charter school but a private school that had some public funding because down in Massachusetts, some towns actually around where I was, they would give money to these schools to accept the students that needed that extra help. Now, we had to fight for that because I'm from New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Obviously, it's easier to deal with in the education system, but it's more involved in your life.
And you loved going there, right?
I hated it. I mean,
no. In the end, like once you're
in
out,
the end, I was ready to be there.
You benefited from that, right?
Yeah, I would not have been to where I was now. Like where I can speak and how I can write and read is all contributed to that school. That one school was the school that really, like, I couldn't read before I got there. Right. I went there in third grade. Like, how do you get a kid to even pass up to third grade without reading? They just kind of pushed me through and just gave me an aid and said, okay, like, she's going to do your work for you. And then now they went to that school. They did everything. They taught.
Do you think there's something specific that they were?
Yeah, they have different things. So there's called the LIPS program, which like helps you with that, people who have like an issue speaking, and then
oh, right. You can just look at someone if they're mouthing something. You know what they're saying.
Yeah, but most of what they're saying, not all of it, but like a good portion of it, they teach you how to read lips.
That helps with body language and everything, right?
It does, yeah. And then there's another one that was like Leonard Martingale, I think it was called. But anyway, basically, Joe Jorgensen wants to help students like that and give them the tools on their own to deal with that instead of having to fight the education system. There was like a lawsuit going on between my family and the town to get me into there because they knew that I was just being pushed through the system.
Right.
And it took 2 years, I think it was, for me to get through that. And the point of that is you shouldn't have to do that. Like, people down in Mass, they could go down into the government and get into it. Although they shouldn't have to go to the government, they should be able to just say, hey, I want to take my money elsewhere. I don't want to have to pay my taxes into my education. I want to take that money, stop paying taxes in education because it's a voluntary society,
right,
and put that money into a school where my kid could go.
And they made it quite hard here for you to do that, right?
They made it really hard. Yeah, I had to get up like 5:30 every morning to catch a bus down there, and it was bad. But I did it for 6 years, and I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them. I wouldn't be able to learn. I wouldn't have been able to probably pass high school.
Right.
But
what are your thoughts on her decision to want to pardon everyone that's in basically federal prison for victimless crimes?
I think it's a good thing to do. There's definitely some crimes that you just shouldn't go to jail for. Like weed, obviously. Like, to me, you know what I mean? It's just weed.
Yep.
It's a plant. Alcohol is very similar to that. Tobacco is very similar to that. And society-wise, it's a little different. Like, people are going to look at it and be like, oh my God, it's a drug for so long. But that's just kind of how the propaganda of the older generation. Exactly.
It comes down to them doing, like she preaches, them doing what they want to do.
Exactly.
Their choices.
Exactly.
They benefit from their own choices, though, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, it might affect your family, but it's not going to directly affect anyone around you. It's not like you doing those drugs is hurting somebody. Like, you're not killing somebody just because you did those drugs. It's not like, oh my God, he did drugs and somebody's dead because of that.
Yep.
Like, it doesn't work like that. If they want to ruin their own life, go right ahead, let them ruin their own life. I mean, it sounds harsh, but
it's only the consenting person that's getting damaged or
exactly
from that.
When you make it like a crime, right? At that point, you have to put them through the system, and then you have to take taxpayers' money. So when you make that a crime, you're filling the system with these people who've done drugs and things that haven't really hurt anyone, and sometimes they have public defenders, and that costs a lot of money. So the more people that you criminalize, the more money that the system needs to give them access to a lawyer.
The more families affected, the more, the higher the incarceration rate, which is extreme right now.
Yep. And then when, say you put a father in jail for 2-3 years because of marijuana, depending on what part of the United States you're in, you take 2-3 years of potential income that he could have given to that family. And now you have that family on food stamps. You have that people,
and in my opinion, you're putting the kid in the position to be the runner-up of his dad.
Exactly, because she said it in a way that I don't technically agree with. She came out and said that like the only way in certain societies, like Section 8, she doesn't agree with. She wants to get rid of Section 8. She wants
the community, whether the rich or the poor,
together
in a community that can work and help each other, not just these segregated areas of town that certain incomes live in.
Yeah, she wants to mix them in, because the way she pointed out is if you have a rich person living across from a very poor neighbor, and that rich person owns a business. Now, this isn't going to happen in every town, however, but I could see where she's coming from.
It's just one scenario to show the possibilities. I think in general, people meeting other people makes just networking.
Networking, exactly.
It's huge.
Now that person, that rich guy might give that poor guy a job, and that poor guy might be able to, feed his family just because he knew the rich guy. Now, if you separate the two and you move the two different classes apart, they're going to be segregated, and they're not going to be within each other. They're not going to know each other. They're not going to see the goods and the evils in between each other. They're just going to look at each other as different.
Yeah, and
when you segregate,
there can be that it can bring in that judgment of, there's these people from this side of town. There's these people from this side of town.
Yeah, and she also described, she came out and said that there is systematic racism, but there hasn't been any newer systematic racism. It's all been generated from the 1930s up to about the 80s when they were resegregating. If you look at the drug laws and firearms laws and the nonviolent offending laws, they got harsher, and then there was more punishment and penalties when they were segregating the two, the white and the black community together. That's when they started criminalizing a lot of things.
Yep.
And a lot of them, for instance, the marijuana law that was wrote in the 30s was the Drug Act, right? Yet it wasn't a scheduled substance. It was just illegal at that point. And it was designed to actually deter Mexican immigrants, because Mexican immigrants lived largely off marijuana at that time. So it was actually a systematic racism law. And those are the type of things that she's described. There has been and there still is laws in place for systematic racism, and she sees that and she wants to get rid of them. For instance, abolishing the ATF. Most of those firearms laws weren't because Al Capone and weren't because the gangsters back then. If you look at the firearms laws, they became when the Black Panthers started arming themselves in the 60s. That's when all of these systematic racism laws and these firearms laws and these drug laws became together. And a lot of the times the Black Panthers were smoking weed and having firearms. So when you look at the surcharge now having a firearm present of narcotics, the charge goes up, you double in jail time, and it's because the Black Panthers, and most of the firearms laws and drug laws that surrounded in the 60s and 70s were directed towards the Black Panthers.
I wonder how that would have been affected if they didn't connect the two there.
I don't think if they didn't associate. I mean, if there wasn't any systematic racism then, let's get real, there was huge systematic racism then. And I'm not going to point one finger at the Republican or Democrat Party, but hugely the people who created those laws are still in office and they're in the Democratic Party. Now, a lot of the Republicans, they did kind of agree with those laws. However, they didn't write the laws. They're just agreeing with the ones that are in there, and they're still systematically racism for it because they're not looking at the origins of the law and thinking, well, this is wrong. We could keep the law or we could rewrite the law, but we have to.
You have to look back and understand why that was put in place and why it was created, and does that relate to anything now? Does that relate to what we have now?
Exactly, and you really have to. Was it to protect people or was it to protect the politicians? They were afraid of the Black Panthers. They're afraid of the Black community creating their own, white, sort of like now. But now I think it's not about racism so much, more about pointing fingers in a direction of hate. We don't like the Republican way of thinking. We don't like the Democrat way of thinking. Now we're gonna point. We're just gonna add racism into it.
We want to keep our own thinking.
Yeah,
that's the difference. We want to do what we want to do.
Exactly.
We don't want to follow these guidelines that were put in place, to help or have this safety area.
And that's what she's really kind of pointing out to.
Because liberty over safety.
Exactly. Freedom over safety is what she preaches. And there is no line for safety. At what point, when is there too much safety? 1984, we read the book in high school. I think we had the same teacher.
I think we're at somewhere now that there's too much safety.
I think the difference between our generation and our parents' generation when it comes to the whole freedom versus safety is that we grew up after, like we were born during 2000 when 9/11 happened, when the Patriot Act came in place, and that's when a lot of our civil liberties were starting to be taken away.
Ripped right from us.
Yep. It was just before we even had them. Like we hear about them and we read about them. We're like, why can't we do that anymore? And everyone goes, well, because of your safety. And there's never any excuse or never any real reason besides safety. And I think that's why our generation is starting to get so fed up with like the spying on us and like the Patriot Act.
Safety is going too far. I can see in certain areas there, it's definitely something to watch. But
exactly,
yeah,
we grew up. So like our parents, they think like they were around where the post propaganda. They were old enough to see the whole, oh my God, because this happened. The propaganda that the government came out and the media came out with, being like, wow, we need to be watched. We need to watch ourselves. We need the NS, all these different government agencies being created. They thought we needed it. Now we don't really see. Our generation looks at it as different, but their generation looks at it as a necessity. I think that's the two different. We never were there for propaganda. Like we're post propaganda. We were never there watching it happen. We never lived it. We never looked at the media and listened to the lies or the truth or whatever it was at the time. We didn't go through that, and we're just fed up with the system we're in now.
I think a lot of the problems we have now is just people have gotten soft.
Yeah, people have gotten soft.
There's been a lot of prosperity and stuff, and I feel like that's kind of where we've ended up because of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Which it's great to hear that, but at the same time, it's everyone's everyone's really soft nowadays. Everyone is so sensitive,
and it's always about like, well, I don't want you to hurt feelings. Like I don't want you to like traumatize or like in quote, like people use those excuses all the time, and it's like, I'm sorry, but where does my freedom of speech draw between your hurt feelings? Like if you're so worried about getting your feelings hurt, sorry, don't go outside. Like it's the same thing with wearing a mask. If you're so worried about getting sick in a public place, you have a mask on to prevent you from getting sick.
Yeah.
Just because I don't have a mask on doesn't mean I need to be yelled at. Because I actually
if you're expecting everyone to wear a mask, you shouldn't be out.
No, you shouldn't be out. If that's an unrealistic expectation. And I think she talks about that a lot too when it comes with safety. That safety is an unrealistic expectation. She believes that everyone should be able to own whatever firearm they want because ultimate safety given to you or provided to you by the government is or anyone is just unrealistic. You can't trust anyone else in your personal safety 100% of the time besides yourself. I think that's where her base comes from, abolishing the ATF.
I think a lot of the people that disagree with that right now is because of that reason, though. They think people just don't want a gun because they think it's because it's dangerous.
It's unnecessary. Too. They look at it as a lot. The police has it, but if you look at the average response time in America, it's 15 minutes. And if you look at all the police departments that are quitting and how the country's going now and how many people are buying firearms, I don't think the argument of firearms, I think the whole gun argument was just killed this year. Once Corona hit and what was it? 26 million new Americans or up to 28 million new Americans are gun owners now, something like that. I'll have to look at the number. I'm probably saying that wrong, but
I think it was a few million.
Oh, it was probably 2.6.
Yeah, I think it was around 2.8, and about 800,000 of them were new. These are all, so it was 2.8 million new gun owners in the United States. 800,000 of them are women.
Oh wow,
brand new gun owners.
Wow. I know in New Hampshire, 77,000 new gun owners since the first of the year. And New Hampshire's pretty small. We only have a population of like 1.5 million.
Yep. Next level, Second Amendment, they're all wiped out.
They're all wiped out. Yeah, you go in, you can't see anything. I mean, the only place, really the only big stores who had extra shit just laying around is the only place that has stuff now. That's a big thing too on the podcast we'll talk about is like firearms and such, but we'll have to get to that next week.
To add more context for you for the firearm discussion you guys were having, gun sales, you talked about how many new members there were. It was just over 2 million. But to put more context on it, April, 71.3% increase in gun owners from 2019 at the same time. March, 85.3 based on 2019's March. So you had a drastic jump. It wasn't just 2 million where people are like, oh, that's a lot.
Right.
No, when you see it's 85%, that's a much bigger gap jump than people might give credit for.
Right.
Yeah. And we look at firearms as tools. It's great that you guys went out and bought those tools. But if you don't know how to use it, if you don't know how to use that tool, don't rely on that tool. Okay, you're going to get somebody hurt. You're going to get somebody, yourself hurt. You're going to get your family hurt. So
leave it aside until you
for those new gun owners, those or even current gun owners who never got training, go out and get training, because there's so much chaos going on in a riot. You shoot one person, it's not going to stop. It's an unrealistic expectation. The bullet's going to stay in that person, or you know what that bullet's going to do. As soon as you can't take a bullet back. There's just saying in that. Okay, so make sure when you give a bullet to somebody in that context that you don't ever want to take it back. There's no regrets of that shot. So go out and get some training, learn how to use it, learn how to be safe with it, and learn the basics of what's going to happen in a defensive scenario. I wanted to add that because I'm big into that stuff, as you know. But yeah, next week, so I think we're going to wrap it up, but next week we're going to be talking about more Joe Jorgensen and Governor Sununu adding to the legal fight of keeping Obamacare, and why we think that's kind of ironic, as him, as a Republican who was so against that first, now wants to keep it so badly.
And more guns.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.